Welcome in Pierre McGuire. You'll see Pierre on NBC throughout the playoffs. Pierre, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Mike. Great to visit with you.
Thank you, Pierre. All right. Let's go to the East and zero in, but let's save the two locals for last. So we'll start with Ottawa-Montreal. What do you expect?
It's going to be a speed series. It's going to be a series where both goaltenders have to step up. Craig Anderson for Ottawa, who had the best goals against in the Eastern Conference, and also obviously Carey Price in Montreal. But there's a bit of a goalie conundrum in both cities because Anderson wasn't great down the stretch. He was coming off an injury, and Robin Leonard played great the last game of the year in Boston. In Montreal, Carey Price didn't start the last game of the year, a game Montreal won on the road in Toronto, Mike. So it's going to be interesting to watch both goaltenders, but this is going to be a speed series, Mike. It's going to involve a lot of young skill, and the one X-factor player could be Erik Karlsson, who won the Norris Trophy last year for Ottawa as the best defenseman in the NHL. He was out most of the year because of a hellacious injury to his Achilles. He's pushed back. He's got himself back in the lineup. He's played the last three games for Ottawa, over 27 minutes in two of those three games. So he could be the X-factor player. It's going to be a tight, long, fast series, Mike.
All right, Toronto-Boston.
Toronto wants a chance to win this. They've got to turn it into a street fight. Colton Orr, the former Ranger, and Fraser McLaren, who came out of the Western Hockey League and has fought with Milan Lucic on at least three different occasions in junior hockey, who's a tough guy for the Bruins, Lucic. If I were Toronto and Randy Carlyle, I'd try to turn the series into a street fight. And I don't mean about fighting. I mean make it physical, make it nasty, a lot of close pushing around the crease, winning board battles. I'd make it a mayhem kind of a series. And if you can do that in your Toronto, you might get Boston out of their game. For Boston, roll your four lines, dominate them with speed, dominate them with size, and the Boston defense, especially Zdeno Chara, Dennis Seidenberg, Adam McQuaid, Johnny Boychuk, crush the smaller Toronto forwards. And I'm talking about Phil Kessel, a former Bruin and a former first-round pick of the Bruins, and Nazem Kadri, who's been a tremendous player for Toronto this year. But Boston's got to utilize their size and their depth, Mike, and if they do, they have a very good chance of winning that series.
The difference between the NHL and the NFL, the difference between the NHL and the NBA playoffs are always in the 8-1 approaches. In the NBA, the 8-1s often are huge walkovers. If it goes 5 games, it's a lot. Like the West is right now, 3-1 Houston. The East was a walkover. Just to give you an example, folks, Pittsburgh, and you'd say Pittsburgh is a really good team, Pierre, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Pittsburgh is a 2.5 to 1 favorite, which means, just to put a number on it, you'd have to lay $250 to win $100 on the Penguins. They're a 2.5 to 1 favorite over the Islanders. The Heat were a 230 to 1 favorite over Milwaukee, who they swept and embarrassed in 4 games. 230 to 1. You'd have to lay $23,000 to win $100. So just to show you the difference in the 8-1 approach. The question was, could Milwaukee win a game? It was like 10 to 1 against. They didn't win a game. In this, it's a 2 to 1. Now, we know 8-1s can be competitive, and that's what makes the NHL playoffs so exciting from the start. What chance do you give the Islanders, and what do they have to do to spring the upset?
First, they've got to get a split in Pittsburgh. If they don't get a split in Pittsburgh and they go back to Long Island down 2-0, they're in trouble because Pittsburgh will smell blood. And if Crosby doesn't start the series, and there's a chance he may, but if he doesn't, by the midpoint of the series, Mike, he'll be back. He's that close to playing. So New York Islanders have to try to get a split out of Pittsburgh. If they don't, I think it becomes a very short series.
What style do the Islanders have to play here, Pierre? Yeah. What do they have to do?
They have to get Pittsburgh to take penalties. Take a page out of what Philadelphia did to Pittsburgh last year. Challenge the more skilled players of the Penguins physically. Get them to retaliate and take penalties. The New York Islanders have one of the best power plays in the league. The Pittsburgh Penguins penalty killing has not been good this year. In years previous, it was always in the top 5. This year, it has not been as good. Part of that's goaltending. Part of that's schematic. Part of that's because they didn't have training camp. No excuses. That's just the reality. The numbers don't lie. The penalty killing hasn't been good. On the other hand, Dougie Waite and the New York Islanders, Waite, the great assistant coach with the Islanders, has done a fantastic job with their power play. And whether it's Luby Visnovsky, whether it's Mark Streit, whether it's John Tavares, whether it's Matt Molson, whether it's Brad Boyce, those guys are buying in on the power play, the entire group. Their power play is lethal. So they've got to get the Penguins out of the game plan. If I were Jack Capuano, I would have taken all the instances from last year's first round, Pittsburgh, Philly, showed them to my player and say, look, these guys they put their pants on the same way you do. They'll take penalties if you frustrate them. You got to try to frustrate them.
Couple of things. We'll talk with Pierre McGuire, NBC Sports, the NHL playoffs upon us. Islanders making the playoffs. Nice story. I have two questions about the Islanders. Number one, can their goalie stand up to this series?
Oh, yeah, Nabokov can, Mike. He's one of the better European-trained goalies. I mean, when he was in San Jose, he was tremendous. San Jose didn't move deep into the playoffs when he was in there, not because of him, but because the team around him wasn't quick enough or wasn't deep enough. He's tremendous. He's a very talented player. He's been a big reason why I believe Gar Snow deserves a lot of credit for this. Remember, it wasn't Gar Snow and the Islanders that signed this player a season ago or 2 seasons ago. It wasn't Gar Snow and the Islanders. It was the Detroit Red Wings that brought him back. He had to clear waivers, and the Islanders were wise enough, even though he threatened to retire, the Islanders were wise enough to take him and use him as an asset. Eventually he comes over and plays and does a good job. The Islanders deserve a lot of credit on this guy, number one. Number two, he's been tremendous for him. He's helped speed their program up by at least a year, Mike, and maybe a year and a half. That's the difference that he's made. I thought they would make the playoffs next year, not this year. They've made it this year. They deserve a lot of credit for that.